Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seat belts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, as this 2016 presidential election cycle continues to heat up and exposes the great divisions, fractures, and all of these sorts of contentious things that exist within the body politique of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, it has come to my attention that these divisions are only growing, and that these divisions have been foisted upon us by a group of individuals that have never held our best interests at heart. Now, as you are well aware, my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have oft-times reiterated on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, just how dangerous the Fabian Socialists are. And it always bears repeating just how dangerous they are, because they are wholly committed to this very divisive and destructive policy of tearing our nation apart at the seams. And again, as we've stated before, the reason that they engage in such chicanery and want to basically be nothing short of quintessential political vandals is because they realize their twisted, dark, and evil machinations are all based in destruction. And they know that they cannot win in the marketplace of ideas. Therefore, they wish to manipulate people, to use the tried and true, although threadbare, tactic of divide and conquer. By pitting American citizen against American citizen, the Fabian Socialists are hoping that they will zap the already limited energy reserves of the American people, who are heavily burdened with overzealous taxation and regulations, making it all but impossible to engage and conduct private business in what was once the freest economy and nation in the entire world. Of course, folks, this is all by design. Remember that the Fabian Socialists that got their start in 19th century Great Britain had adopted an original iconography. An iconography that was so negative in its connotation that they have since abandoned it. But their original imagery was based on that of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, if you remember, folks, that is the method in which Scripture referred to the way in which Satan would infiltrate society. Why is it that it's always the case with respect to these frothing at the mouth, fundamentalist, left-wing ideologues that they embrace Satan? Remember that Saul Alinsky, in his so-called magnus opus of Rules for Radicals, had dedicated the entire text to none other than Lucifer, the dark, fallen angel of light who had become a master of deception and destruction. Well, it always is that way with respect to these left-wing ideologues, because they are diametrically opposed to the natural order of things. It's important to recall that our Constitution, and indeed our Republican form of government, are all based on the notion of the natural law. The natural law underpins everything. It is the natural order of things. It explains how the proper scope and application of government is to apply to the facets of our daily lives. Yet, the historical revisionists who have infiltrated all of our institutions of education from coast to coast and border to border are busy working to indoctrinate the up-and-coming generation and hoping to get their claws on that generation and those generations which have yet to be born. This is all about power and control. And where the Fabian Socialists have licked the conservatives, as of late particularly, is they have always had a long-term goal. This has always been about posterity to them. Because if you recall, the way that our natural law tenets work, and indeed the way that the American system of polity was designed, our founding fathers expected to have our system of government based on our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, the God of nature himself, to posterity. It was all about ensuring that future generations would not only be able to exercise and enjoy their fundamental and inalienable rights, protected by the greatest inheritance and birthright of any people on the face of the planet, none other than our Constitution, but not just that, but to expand upon that, to ensure that they would have an easier time of exercising their fundamental and inalienable rights. That is the quintessential nature of our representative republic. Well, the Fabian socialists, having realized that their twisted doctrine and ideology would never win within the confines of the marketplace of ideas, decided that they needed to come up with a scheme to manipulate, to turn to raw emotionalism, to make the people as malleable as putty in their dark, twisted, dank, and dirty hands. And so the way they did this is they had a plan which was designed to last to posterity. Consider this the exact and polar opposites that was always a part of humanity. The only way that we can understand certain things is to know that there is a polar opposite. Light versus dark, good versus evil, right versus wrong. And if you start to dilute that by embracing such twisted notions as moral relativism, you start to see the entire societal fabric, which is based on a moral foundation and an undeniable self-evident truth, that of the natural law tenets that underpin our Constitution, you begin to unravel society's fabric itself. And of course, folks, that has been their goal from the beginning. But with this whole notion of identity politics, it is yet another tried and true tactic that they implement and have employed time and time again. Throughout their steady march, their patient waiting, they pull that card out in order to disarm people who are making logical statements. Again, it's because they've created or conjured up all these sorts of magical buzzwords that are designed to shut off people's mental faculties, causing them to rawly emote and forget all that is important, to simply stop listening. Of course, this is also why you see on America's campuses this movement to destroy our fundamental and inalienable right to freedom of expression. The very First Amendment is under a relentless, deliberate, and incessant assault by these nefarious forces who are seeking to fundamentally transform who we are, both as a nation and as a people. Now, folks, if this sounds diabolical, twisted, or evil, that's because that's exactly what it is. This is all being orchestrated upon us to strip us, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, of our rightful authority. That has been their goal all along, and they have been working towards this goal for over a century and a half now. But we see that the divisiveness has reached a fever pitch, particularly with respect to the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian, Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron, also known as John Miller. All throughout the primary process, he engaged in a scorched earth policy, all designed to hopelessly divide the gutless opposition party, or GOP, base, thereby ensuring that we have a disaster on our hands with this looming general election for November. Now, the Donnie, at least according to one of his former Super PAC managers, that Stephanie lady, claimed that he never really wanted to win in the first place. That means that his entire role, from the get-go, aside from being a publicity stunt which he might utilize to create another reality television program, was orchestrated for the purpose of dividing the base of the party. The great weight of the evidence shows it. For instance, his recent statements that it's the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party, and that he doesn't need the Conservatives to win, that is arrogance personified. It is truly arrogance personified. When you say you don't need the base of the party, the very thing that has been the fuel, the lifeblood of the Republican Party, then you are going to see the same kind of results and the same outcomes that you have seen in the last several successive presidential election cycles. What was the problem in 2008? Well, the problem was not only were the Fabian socialists within the rank and file of the Democrat Party galvanized behind their most divisive, most open at that time, as Bernard Sanders was not vying for higher political office at that time, Fabian utopian socialist candidate. And the gutless opposition party, or GOP, was divided because they had foisted, through the great efforts of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, the most weak, or rather the weakest, feckless, spineless, leftist candidate in John F. McCain. That was a disaster. We thought, surely after that, the gutless opposition party would have realized that every time we attempt to out-democrat the Democrats, it comes back to bite us in the posterior. That it is not a winning formula to continue to further these leftist agendas that have no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. But they are thick-skulled. They are hard-hearted. They do not believe in the true tenets of federalism, nor in our representative Republican form of government. They have gotten cozy and complacent. And worse yet, as we've seen all throughout these disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime, they have become collaborative. They see this as an opportunity to expand their power. Now, how did they get to this point? How did our entire system of polity, which was once based on the fundamental, self-evident truth of the natural law, devolve into this circus sideshow freak and become wholly unrecognizable to those of us who still hold a modicum of sanity? Well, a lot of it boils down to this tired, threadbare notion of so-called identity politics. Again, we see that the ugly fissures that run through the party, threatening to cleave us apart, thereby paving an easy path for Madam Clinton to secure the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, was made possible first and foremost by this movement of identity politics. It has its roots all the way back 100 years ago. There was a socialist at that time who ran the International Workers of the World, what was known in the common vernacular as the Wobblies. He ran for Congress first in 1916. Well, not first, that was one of his runs. His first run was as a so-called social democrat back in 1900. He ran again in 1904, again in 12, and the last time in 1920, from a prison cell. Why was he in a prison cell for the last time that he was vying for the highest office in the land? Why, it was because he was engaging in subversive conduct. He was attempting to orchestrate the violent overthrow of this representative Republican form of government of ours. And he did so because he was a true socialist. He believed that the pre-existing political structure and system had to be destroyed. And we saw this again with the communist Chinese under Mao Zedong when they engaged in what was then known as the Cultural Revolution. Left-wing ideology is destructive by nature. It is incapable of creating. It is a parasitic system that would be known as theft by any other name, that would be discarded by anyone if its effects were felt by all. But it's never always felt by all. And that's because, as Alexis Tocqueville said all those years ago, that socialism of any form, capacity, or flavor is a new rehash, a remaking of feudalism. It's essentially New Age feudalism. Why? Because those who always advocate for socialism are basing their entire system off of centralized control. If you recall, the medieval system of feudalism was based off of a hierarchical system that was a pure caste system. Certain people, by either luck of the draw through being born into nobility, or through might makes right, would laud their power over what was known in medieval vernacular as villains. It's amazing the impact of that word. We still use the word villain. It still contains the negative connotation. But what its original meaning was not some force of evil that was powerful, that could destroy. A villain was a landless peasant, a serf. That's all it was. It was another name for a serf. And again, we see that these nefarious forces on the left were pushing this radical and twisted ideology even 100 years ago. But the major difference between then and now is that the American people had enough of a unified vision, enough of a sense of a national identity, that they wholeheartedly rejected someone who came out and said, I am an outright socialist. Someone like Vermont Senator Burn Me Sanders would not have fared well in all of the election cycles in which Eugene V. Debs tried to run. But it wasn't just that the socialists were bad. There was the progressive movement at that time, and unfortunately, the progressives were more like the Fabians. They were able to create this false doctrine and this false perception that they weren't so bad. All of their steps towards a centralized autonomy or a centralized autocracy was, not really bad. It was just a veneer. It was, they created that wolf in sheep's clothing type persona. They weren't the thumb their noses at the establishment. The idea was to work their way into the establishment and use the establishment to destroy itself. Now, let me preface this by saying that when I use the phrase establishment here, I'm not using it in the way that it's being used today. I don't mean like the gutless opposition party's detente wing, which is known commonly, or is commonly referred to as the establishment wing of the Republican Party. There is no connection to that. What it really is the established system of government. And that, again, this is why we have warned here on Radio Aviation Excellence, going back to our first episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015, of the dark and twisted game of semantics that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the Salivating Mainstream Media, as well as the other nefarious pawns of the radical frothing at the mouth leftists, play. They play this game of semantics because they want to change the meanings of words. As the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs warned us in his magnus opus of Keynes at Harvard well over 50 years ago, these forces are acting in collusion in such a way as to not only overzealously regulate the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people of the United States, but to confuse them, because they are betting on the fact that the American people, crushed by the burden of these overzealous regulations, attempting just to carve a niche out in life, to sustain their standard of living, their quality of life, are not going to have the energy nor the political capital to expend on this system. to just read into all of these convoluted, made-up terms that the Fabian socialists are using to further entrench their ideology and to indoctrinate the up-and-coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born. That is the true twisted dark side of what they are working towards. And again, they have to destroy what came before. That's why it's so amazing that these words within our lexicon are used in such a loose-knit fashion that we forget their original connotation. Again, villain being a perfect example of how twisted political forces throughout the course of history has gone to change the meaning and connotations of a word to such a degree that the original meaning is all but lost. Most people don't even think about how villain was originally used to refer to the oppressed, to the landless peasant. Now, whenever there's a true oppressor, they're called a villain. Isn't it amazing? It's gone completely in the opposite direction. And that is what they are attempting to do with this whole notion of identity politics, this type of balkanization that they're attempting to foist upon the body politic of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And again, folks, this is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been warning you about Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron, also known as John Miller, for the past 10.5 months. We knew that he was an agent provocateur of division. We knew that his divisive scorched earth policies would leave us in a very weak position. And for those who are clamoring for a tyranny of a false unity, who say that we must support him because he is the lesser of two evils, you are the ones that empower this sort of nonsense that is threatening to tear this once thriving and affluent and rich in character and spirit nation apart at the seams. And when Donald J. Trump falls, or when he, should he, by some cruel twist of fate, manage to secure the highest office in the land, betray everything and become a horrible charlatan, much like the Peel and Squeal president, the Chiquita-in-chief, who currently occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, don't come crying to us. Don't come whining to us, because we told you, and you tried to say we were wrong, and you tried to browbeat us, and you tried to tell us that our voice doesn't matter, that the alternative is just words. Yet you say that in election cycle after election cycle. It is always the same line. It is so threadbare that it has no thread to it at all. Just a light gust of wind would tear apart your entire argument, and it would collapse into a pile of meaningless dust. We have to get back to sanity in this country. And one of the points that we here at the Wright Flyer have emphasized, stressed, ever since we first went on the air, and continue to stress right now, even as I speak into this microphone, is that the Constitution is the key. It provides the solution to all of the outlandish problems that are currently facing our nation, and that this has been the solution ever since the foundation and formation and conception of our country over 230 years ago. And the reason that this is the case is because our entire system, as I mentioned at the opening of today's program, is based on the natural law tenets which are by their own very nature timeless. In other words, they're just as applicable today as they were 230 years ago, as, God willing, they will be 230 years from now. But again, it requires that we, as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this country, proactively maintain, safeguard, and defend our fundamental and inalienable rights. So again, it brings up this entire tired notion and doctrine of identity politics. What was it that dominated most of the summer of political correctness and moral relativism. That is, last summer, the summer of 2015. It was this divisive notion of identity politics, rooted in the idea that America is inherently, by its DNA, to quote the Chiquita-in-Chief, as he blabbed in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and thereby institutional racism is an inherent part of America. So we see the violent outbursts of those protests by that thug-like terrorist organization Black Lives Matters, all designed to pit American against American, all designed to distract us from the truth. Now, how do we know that this is their twisted goal and machination? How do we know that these have been their aims for at least the past half century? But as we have mentioned before, it goes back even further than that. Well, we have the academicians from them. We have the writings that they live by. Their Bible, their doctrine, it's found in Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. That has been warned about all throughout these disastrous 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime. Glenn Beck and various others have gone out on a limb, risking everything, to warn the American people about the dangers that are lurking within the body politic of their own country. And yet the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media refuse to do the right thing. They refuse to cover it. They are derelict in their duty, turning their back on their First Amendment obligations. Because as my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have oft-times reiterated on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, whenever you exercise your fundamental and inalienable rights, you must always remember and keep in mind the simple truth that couched with those fundamental and inalienable rights is always a duty, obligation, and above all, a responsibility. In the case of the media, and having a free press in the United States, it is couched with the duty, obligation, and responsibility of being a watchdog for the true popular sovereigns, for the true ultimate wielders of power and authority in this nation, we the people. Well, they certainly didn't do that in 2008. They failed to vet Obama. And they certainly worked with respect to the gutless opposition party, or GOP, towards foisting the most unelectable candidates on us, while peddling this false perception and doctrine of, well, you have to reach out to the independents, you have to reach out to the moderates, therefore a true constitutionalist is always unelectable. But now, sensing the blind rage and fury that is sweeping through this nation like an inferno, these charlatans who have been picking our nominees in the slew of the last several election cycles have tried to change the narrative again. Remember, all throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle, they have been saying that this is the cycle. This cycle, right now, is the one in which conventional wisdom will be cast by the wayside. The one in which we abandon all that was known to be true. And they act like they're dumbfounded. But they shouldn't be. And they're not really. Donald J. Trump is a monster of their creation. But they were not alone in creating this Frankenstein monster who is now the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party. For you see, the gutless opposition party's leadership deserves a vast majority and brunt of the blame here. Remember the slogan of the 2014 midterm elections by Mr. Bucket himself, Karl Rove, was that, well, we see that true Tea Party candidates can't win, trying to refer to 2012 when he did his part to divide, you see, once again, using a form of identity politics, the base of the Republican Party, thereby ensuring that the leftward slide continues. Well, now the narrative is, looky, 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 Donnie Donnie Trump, he's good. He's real good. But he's not. Why would the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, who has always hated the conservative movement, who has always hated the fact that the American people are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, suddenly give a damn about the best interests of the Republican Party? They don't. And the reason that they gave Donald J. Trump the massive amounts of free airtime that he had, as we've exposed on past episodes, 3 times as much as any of the other candidates vying for the highest office in the land, it's because he is a vulgarian. He is a ratings bonanza. But remember, when the rubber meets the road, when it really comes down to that which is important, they fall back to their propagandistic narrative and agenda, and they will turn against the quaff waffler. Hell, we're already seeing it with Jeff Bezos's The Washington Post. They are doing hit piece after hit piece. And again, the Branch Trumpidians run around trying to scream at the top of their lungs like modern-age lollards, claiming that Donald Trump can do no wrong. That none of these things matter. Yeah, but Trump, or I don't care about his past. Give me an ever-loving break. This is ridiculous. This is beyond the pale. This is beyond acceptable. In fact, it is wholly unacceptable because they are essentially creating a cult of personality. Hell, they have created a cult of personality. And that is what we have suffered under with respect to the Chiquita-in-Chief President Peel and Squeal himself, Barack Hussein Obama. These last 2 disastrous terms have been unbearable. But instead of going back to reasoned rationale, going back to the philosophies that underpin this entire representative republic of ours, we have gone to raw emotionalism. This is the post-truth campaign, as I have reiterated times before, based on raw emotionalism, manipulation, and chicanery. Folks, there is a reason that I call the quaff waffler Donald J. Trump, a.k.a. John Barron, a.k.a. John Miller, the P.T. Barnum of our era. He is a carnival barker of the worst sort. He is designed to basically make you stop thinking so you will give up the most precious currency that you hold. And no, that precious currency is not dollars and cents. That precious currency is your fundamental and inalienable rights. The very things that if we lose them, we will have nothing. If we lose them, our nation teeters on the brink of death and destruction, and it makes our journey, our task, all the more difficult in that we then have to rebuild. But folks, we don't have the logistics in place, and we don't have the frameworks in place to create a system that was as open and honest and free as this current representative republic of ours. It's important to recall that our Constitution is the longest-lasting, contiguous-running constitutional document in the entire course of human events. That means in all of world history, our system has been the most stable, the most open, the most honest, and the most successful. Of course, you're not going to see this in our institutions of education. You're not going to hear this with respect to those who claim that the inherent DNA of the United States of America is tinged with the stain of racism. Thugs like the Black Lives Matters organization, thugs like those who were waving the Mexican flag protesting in front of Donald J. Trump's rally. Don't get me wrong, folks. You know You know that we don't like Donald J. Trump here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. In fact, we told you that we didn't because we wanted to be open, honest, and objective with you. Because isn't it a fresh breath of air to have a source of information, an information media outlet, even though it's based in opinion, tell you the truth about where they stand? That is such a rare thing today. But those Mexican flag-waving protesters, no, that's wrong. That's identity politics. Donald Trump should have the right to speak, even though what he says is nothing but drivel and worthless trash and nonsense. To turn against the fundamental tenets that underpin this entire representative Republican form of government of ours is to turn against the very inheritance that we have, the very thing that is the greatest aspects of the national character, heritage, spirit, and above all, identity of the American people. And again, identity politics is designed to unravel this very notion that we have a national identity. Why? What is the root cause of this? What is it that unites the American people? Is it language? Well, no, there's really no official language of the United States. Is it culture? In an extent. But remember, we're called the Great Melting Pot. Now, yes, cultural Marxists are using that for their own twisted Fabian socialist agenda. But ultimately, when you get down to the bare foundation, what unites us as a nation and a people is the idea and the notion that the United States of America is a nation of laws, not of men. In other words, it is the supreme law of the land which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, is the United States Constitution. That is what unites us. And therefore, that is our national identity. And therefore, when you engage in identity politics, what you are attempting to do is to tear apart the very thing that unites us, the very thing that makes us a functioning, cohesive government and people, a country. And so, when all of those people who are the most ardent acolytes of Donald J. Trump, who are the same ones who flock to the comment sections of various social media outlets and various news outlets and attempt to say that we have rejected conservatism because conservatism is a failed ideology, nationalism works. Well, tell me, what is Trump's nationalism based off of? It's certainly not based off of the Constitution, because he has reiterated numerous times by his own words that he has never once fully read the United States Constitution because he never saw any value in it. Well, if that is really what unifies us, and yes, it really is what unifies us, then how can he be a nationalist? Because nationalism in the United States would have to be coalesced around, built around, shaped and centered upon the United States Constitution, because that is the only thing that unites us both as a nation and a people. Again, you're not going to hear this sort of analysis from the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. They don't give a damn about this. They don't give a damn about you. You're not going to hear it from Donald Trump's people, because they don't give a damn about it. Again, this whole notion of populism is a failed ideology. And yes, I have seen the erroneous notion that's been floating around that populism isn't an ideology, that populism is just a tactic utilized by certain politicians to build their base of support. No, populism is an ideology. Populism is a political system. It's one that has failed every time that it has been attempted. And the reason that it has failed is because it is based on destruction. Let's look at what the platform or position of a populist movement is. Well, it is a political ideology which holds that the so-called virtuous citizens are being mistreated by a small circle of elites who may be overthrown if the people recognize the danger and work together. The elites are depicted as trampling in illegitimate fashion upon the rights, values, and voice of the legitimate people. That's one approach. But it's based off of destruction. And the problem is, if it is the elites that are doing this to us, then why are they supporting the man that has propped up this system for at least the past 3 decades? I'll tell you why they're propping him up. Because they bought into the malarkey. They bought into the lies. They thought that he is who he claims to be. And folks, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been warning you for the past 10.5 months that no, he is not who he claims to be. He is a charlatan. He is a fraud. He is doing this for his own self-aggrandizement. Because throughout his 70 years of life, Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron, also known as John Miller, has only ever cared about one thing, and that is none other than Donald J. Trump himself. It is all about him, and no one else matters. Nothing else is important. Nothing else even crosses the quaff waffler's hairpiece of a mind. You know, there is that old saying, a harebrained scheme. It applies to Donnie. His entire campaign infrastructure, all of the logistics that would be necessary to win in the general election, he's already gone thermonuclear on that, folks. He's already attacked that. He's already done everything to destroy it. Because in all of the states in which he's won primary and caucus decisions, he's dismantled the framework that was there. Meaning that going against Hillary in the looming general election slated for this November, he's not going to stand a snowball's chance in hell. She's kept all of her work. He has intentionally put himself in an uphill position. Why? Because he never wanted to win in the first place. He never really wanted this. He just wanted to assist the person that he was the top donor for when she was the senator for the state of New York. Folks, the great weight and plethora of the evidence is there. There's both direct and circumstantial evidence enough to build a case to show that Donald J. Trump is a fraud, a huckster, a charlatan, a snake oil salesman, and the P.T. Barnum of our era. And this is why he has engaged in this disastrous notion of identity politics. This is why he has employed the scorched earth policies that have left the base of the GOP so hopelessly divided that every aspect of this 2016 presidential election cycle has been turned into a nightmare. A nightmare that we can ill afford to accept right now because our nation is in the midst of an identity crisis coupled with a constitutional crisis. But more than just a singular constitutional crisis, we have seen throughout these disastrous failed 2 terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime that it has been a litany of constitutional crises. One crisis after another. And again, the gutless opposition party has its fair share of blame on this, because as you know, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, changed the meaning of the acronym GOP away from Grand Old Party to Gutless Opposition Party. Why? Because if they had mounted any resistance whatsoever to Obama, it has been token resistance at best. Take, for prime example, Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House. Remember, before he was slated to be the vice presidential nominee for the ill-fated Mittens-Romnikins campaign back in 2012, his whole thing was about the Ryan budget. Boy, isn't it funny that's never mentioned anymore? The graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism have fast moved on. They think it's not relevant to the current media cycle. You see, the charlatans are about themselves. They are the ones that created this. They are the ones, even after they were handed a mandate by the people in the midterm elections of 2014, who continue to try and say that, well, we're trying to reach across the aisle to show that government works. No, damn it, we didn't put you there for that. We put you there to obstruct. Now, for those who have given their support to the Quaff Waffle himself because they think that he is going to shake up the system, open your eyes. Listen to the words he has said himself. Now, we know you're not going to. We know that you suffer from the ostrich syndrome, but you suffer from an even worse case of it. You don't merely stick your head in the sand, you stick your head up your posterior. But when Trump said that he is a political chameleon, that he can assume any position necessary at any time to be custom-tailored for a particular audience, that's all you need to know. That is doing the same thing as Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan. That's doing the same thing as the very people you claim to be diametrically opposed to. Hypocrisy knows no bounds and no limitations with the Branch Trumpidians. And they think that they were the angry ones? Oh, no. They have not even seen the brunt that will be unleashed upon them if this representative Republican form of government, the most open, honest form, the most stable and secure, freest government ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above, should collapse. There will be real hell to pay. There will be no quarters. There will be no relent. And we will all be swept up in the whirlwind. No, I am not advocating violence here. No, I am not advocating death and destruction or there to be blood in the streets. But at some point, we're going to reach that untenable mark where there can be no denial that we have handed the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic to a totalitarian dictator, that all of our fundamental and inalienable rights will be encroached upon, belittled, besmirched, and eradicated, leaving us with this unacceptable hulk of what was once the United States of America. Folks, are you prepared to pay the price to lose your liberty? Are you prepared to look your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren in the eyes and say, I'm sorry that you're not free. I'm sorry that you had to fight because I was unwilling to open my eyes to the truth and to the reality of what was going on. I failed to acknowledge the totality of the circumstances. I failed to listen to the warnings that were given. And it wasn't as if these warnings were just given once, as a brief whisper in the wind. No, these warnings have been shouted from the mountaintops, reiterated time and time and time again for the last 10.5 months straight. This nation cannot continue forward on the path that it currently is. And that includes being on a path that is proposed by the Quaff Waffle. The Quaff Waffle has no core convictions, no values. You see, he can play an entirely different game of identity politics. He can identify himself as anything he wants to be, and he has even said so by his own admission. And still, This has not been exploited. This has not been acknowledged. The branch Trumpidians are convinced that their messianic figure has come down from providence above to save us, that his bigly words and his smallly hands and his badly hair is going to somehow propel this nation into a new era. Oh, it's going to propel us into a new era, all right. But it's not the era that you're hoping for. It's certainly not an era of prosperity. The man is a fool. He is an idiot savant by any other name. And yet this is the best that the gutless opposition party or GOP can do? Is this really what we're trying to say? Have we really fallen this far as a people and a nation that we have lost so much of the sight of who we are? I refuse to allow that to be the case. And that is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have sworn to continue to fight for spreading the knowledge of our shared United States Constitution. Because by fostering and developing that fluent and working knowledge of our Constitution, and thereby our fundamental and inalienable rights, we empower ourselves to stand up to all of these nefarious forces that work for totalitarianism, for this type of political vandalism that is the central tenet of this sort of nonsensical ideology of identity politics. The only way that we are going to be able to see that the American people are united is to go back to the Constitution. Because that is the only thing that unites us. It is the only thing that draws us together. And it is a powerful and inspirational force if we would just give it a chance. You know, we have heard this line be repeated all throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle. The Constitution is quaint, antiquated, it's failed us. It's not working. Clearly, it's not working because, look, the government just ignores it. Barack Hussein Obama ignores it. Well, of course it's working that way when we, as the ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, are not doing our duty and obligation as a party to this social contract. If a party breaches a contract in contract law, it is their responsibility to seek a redress of grievances. It is their onus, their duty, their obligation to ensure that the contract is enforced. The same applies to the Constitution. It is our duty. It is why we are the popular sovereigns. And you know, the Fabian socialists try and disregard this fact, but the reason that we have the Second Amendment is to protect us from the government and to ensure that if they are violating in holistic fashion the clear and concise language contained in the Constitution, then we have an ability to bring about a redress of grievances. Heaven forbid that we take responsibility onto ourselves. Heaven forbid that we actually live up to the ideals that formed the very spine and foundation of this once thriving country. Again, those nefarious revisionist historians, those dyed-in-the-wool Fabian socialists, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and now the Trumpidians don't care. They have their own agenda. For the Trumpidians, it's just political vandalism. It's just destruction. They want to set the thing on fire and link arms together and sing "Burn, Baby, Burn." Well, go to hell. Because we will not allow you to burn down this nation. We don't have the tools or the logistics to build a free nation at this time. And you really want to open us up to such divisiveness, to such division? Oh, that is foolishness personified. That is the path to ruination. And it will get us to ruination faster than any of these other twisted ideologies or doctrines that you have foisted upon us. It will put us in an unacceptable position that we will be unable to dig ourselves out of in easy fashion. Why do you insist upon, you Trump Vidians, making our work all the more difficult? Why do you insist upon not even acknowledging that there are major flaws with your candidate, unless it's in some flippant manner, to then come back with your canned response of, yeah, but Trump, or Obama did it too. Oh, mommy, Obama did it too. Get real. Get real. Oh, and you're going to tell us that the Supreme Court is what matters? Okay, yeah, it's going to change the scope of the court for 50 plus years. Then why didn't you support the candidate that had the best knowledge of how to fix the Supreme Court? The one who argued more times in front of the Supreme Court than any other licensed Texas attorney. The one who stood up for our rights over and over and over again and won. Oh, well, he's lying Ted. He's a Canadian. Trump told me, the quaff waffler, he's so smart. He's run all these businesses into the ground. I mean, he's run all these businesses, and he's a billionaire. A billionaire. Give me an ever-loving break. Because what you are doing there, what you are showing there, is either that you are a political neophyte or that you are a bumbling idiot of the worst sort, and I don't like insulting idiots. Well, there we are. There we are. We see that identity politics has now moved past the usual creeds of race, gender, and LGBTQ, STFU, WTF, LMAO. It has now moved into what? A political ideology? A political ideology based off of populism and vandalism? Oh, that's something to put down in the history books. That's something that's going to really show the strength of character of the American people. Folks, if it sounds like my words are dripping with sarcasm, it's because they are. It's because I'm fed up with having to fight on all sides, on all fronts, to preserve our Constitution. To see that there were those who once claimed to truly stand for the Constitution, who would have fought beside us in the trenches, in the proverbial sense, and in the literary sense, who have abandoned their principles, who have turned their backs on everything, and then they bemoan the fact that conservatism is supposedly dead. No. The only reason that conservatism would even look dead is because there are so many in this country who have forgotten what it means to be popular sovereigns, who have forgotten just how important the Constitution of the United States really is. Those people need to go back and have a remedial lesson. Because I'm sure that a vast majority of them have not even once learned what the proper scope and application of government is. I'm sure that many of them are convinced that the United States of America is a democracy, when in fact we are a representative republic. You see, words have meaning. And if you ignore those meanings, or if you buy into this twisted game of semantics that has been foisted upon us by the historical revisionists who have infiltrated our institutions of education all throughout America, and whether you buy the feckless and stupid nonsense peddled by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, then you have done a great disservice not only to the nation, but to yourself. Folks, what we are trying to do here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is to empower you to stand up and realize that the only ones who can save this nation, it's not some damn politician. It's you. It's me. It's us as private citizens. Us as the ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Why don't you acknowledge that? Why don't you realize that a man or a woman or any person or thing, since we need to placate the LGBTQ, STFU, LMAO, WTFs, and who claim that they have the power to save the country, actually are also able to destroy it and are more likely to do so. Our founding fathers inherently distrusted any form of centralized authority. Our founding fathers stood for the principle of self-accountability, self-responsibility, and through which you gain self-determination. That works in you. That is your duty. The onus is on you and me and my first officer, Jeremy Grapenden, and our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, all of us in our capacity as popular sovereigns. We are tasked with these duties and obligations. And yet we see that this false narrative, this false notion, this false doctrine and perception that has been foisted on the decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizens has pushed us to this untenable situation. Circumstances couldn't be any worse than they currently are. And how did we wind up here? We wound up here because we have allowed ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security. How many of you, within our cherished listening passengers and audience members, have heard the phrase, "Oh, that could never happen in America. It'll never happen here. This sort of divisiveness could never happen in America. Our government's benevolent." I'm sure you've all heard it because it's been reiterated ad nauseum throughout recent history, at least for the past 60 to 70 years. Think about it. With the close of the Second World War, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media at that time peddled this false, nonsensical narrative that the government of the United States of America was always about freedom, that it was some benevolent force that would never raise a finger nor harm hide nor hair of the body politic of the United States. What a laughable bunch of drivel. There had already been poignant examples in the history of the United States of America of the government operating in a staunch fashion against the citizens. Hell, even recent history for them. Remember the World War I veterans who were denied their pension, who marched on Washington? What was Fabian socialist FDR's response? To send out the tanks to shoot in to this non-violent protest group. And what was the excuse used at that time? Remember that these were the brave men who stood in the trenches, who were exposed to poison gas, who stood up to the call, and many were drafted and sent over to fight a war in distant lands under a president who swore he would never take us to war, Fabian socialist Woodrow Wilson. They were promised a pension because they were the brave doughboys, they were the brave devil dogs, the American fighting man who was second to none in courage, valor, honor, and distinction. But no. When it came to broken promises by the hands of government, he was just another tool, another implement, another thing to be swept aside, discarded with, and destroyed. And so they moved the tanks out and they shot into the crowd, even though many of these veterans had their wives and children with them. No, that didn't matter. It never matters to these nefarious Fabian socialists who are hell-bent on the absolute and total destruction of the United States. But to say that our government is some benevolent force that would never raise a finger to harm the body politic of the United States, or to harm or kill or annihilate the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, is to deny the open and obvious facts of history. Just as it is closing your eyes to say that Donald J. Trump has not espoused radically progressive, extremist, left-wing, Fabian socialist views for the vast majority of his adult life. Why are we not holding him accountable? Oh, well, Reagan was a Democrat too, a lifelong one. Except for 18 years prior to being the nominee for President of the United States of America, he had been a Republican. He had even served as the most conservative governor in California. Again, the light of truth shines through. When did Donald Trump switch? Well, in 2012, he was saying that Mitt Romney's approach to self-deportation with illegal aliens was too mean-spirited. We had to have cheap labor. They had to have a path to citizenship. There was no way we could deport them, and we certainly couldn't build a wall. We certainly couldn't build a wall. Oh, but now I'm going to build a wall just like I built a tower. I got smally hands. I got hair. Oh, but the crazy things that Donald Trump says, that doesn't matter. It doesn't? What do we have to go by, other than the things he said? Because as he proudly boasts in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Media for the salivating mainstream media, the School of Journalism for that, over and over again, I'm not a politician. I've got great hair. I got smally hands. Don't pay no attention to my smally hands. I use big words. Use big words like bigly. Oh, that's right. The only thing we have to go by is what he's donated money to. How about the $25,000 he kept donating to Terry McAuliffe, a tax cheat, and the current Democrat governor of Virginia, whom he supported as late as 2014. So let's see. Yeah, he's the same as Reagan. 18 years as opposed to, maybe 2 years? Not even that? It's an invalid comparison. But you see, all of their arguments are based off of a faulty premise, and the reason it's based off of a faulty premise is there is nothing real about Donald J. Trump. There is nothing real about the skunk-pelted quaff waffler. We could say that his so-called conservative credentials are built upon a house of cards, but it's more apt and apropos to say that they are built in a Waffle House, that it flip-flops. More so than John Kerry ever did in the 2004 presidential election cycle. Again, folks, words and deeds have repercussions. There are consequences. We have yet to see what the consequences will be for this 2016 presidential election cycle, but you damn sure can't say that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, did not do our part to try and sound the warning. But we can only sound the warning. We will never tell you how to vote. We will never tell you how to exercise your fundamental and inalienable rights. We have no place to do so, just as those who are pushing for a tyranny of the false unity have no place to tell us how to exercise our fundamental and inalienable right to vote. But that's where we are now. That's where people like Chucky Hurt, the editor-in-chief for the Drudge Report, that's really the Pravda wing of the Quaff Wafflers campaign, come out and say, just shut the hell up and line up. We had to line up behind your unacceptable candidates. What a presumptuous thing to say. You think we lined up with Mitt Romneykin, who was the architect of Obamacare? You think we support this ever unrelenting slide to the left? I've got news for you, Chucky, and it's gonna hurt. But it's this. If you keep pushing this narrative of the lesser of two evils, you're going to get the worst candidate each and every time. Why? Because it has become a precedent that this unending, incessant leftward slide and the death spiral of our republic is acceptable. And Donald J. Trump is far more of a loose cannon Fabian socialist than either John McCain or Mitten Romneykins. But they're all charlatans, and they're all unacceptable, and we are sick and tired of it. How often are you going to keep trashing the Constitution? How often are we going to have to keep fighting this battle in our own ranks when the left manages to fight in unison? Even when they're killing each other, they call each other comrade. Oh, Comrade Trotsky, he was just misunderstood and just wrong, and yeah, I had to kill him because I'm Joe Stalin, but he's still a good guy. Think about that for a moment. Think about just how divisive and destructive that is. And to add fuel to that fire, look at the identity politics that are raging in this country. Instead of saying we are one national people through the Constitution, Trump continues to abide by the divisive nonsense. He continues his gutter-sniping campaign. Well, that's not going to work against Hillary. Hillary's already got this set up with the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media to paint her as some victim. She's going to play the identity politics game, and she's going to run circles around Donnie who can't even form a coherent sentence. Donnie, who can never admit that he's made a mistake. Oh, I've never made a mistake in my life. I've never had to ask God for forgiveness. You know, I am a religious man because I built a tower. And I think the Bible mentioned in 2 Corinthians, or maybe it was some other place about the Tower of Babel. I would have made that work because I'm the greatest. I'm the best. I'm the windliest. Give me an ever-loving break. Give me an ever-loving break. What a charlatan jackass. What a fraud. What a huckster. That is not what it takes to be a leader of the United States. And sure, I can already hear the shrill voices of the Trumpeteers and the Trumpvidians saying, but Randy, he ran a business. He's a successful businessman. Really? Where's Trump's steaks? Where is Trump's shuttle? Where is Trump magazine? Where is the wonderful pleasure palace that he was going to build in New Jersey? Where are those Trump casinos where he tried to use eminent domain to take a woman's house? They're all gone. Why? They all failed. Yeah, he's a greatly businessman. Yes, I understand that failure is a part of success. I understand that you cannot taste success without failure. I've had my own fair share of failures. But you know what the difference is? I don't use other people's money to fail. I use my own. I don't go out and try and destroy other people's lives in order to prop mine up. That is an integral difference. That is me following the tenets and notion of sacred honor like our founding fathers did. They put the interest of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, above their own. They risked their lives, their fortunes, their families, but above all, and most importantly to them, their sacred honor. On an idea that happened to be the greatest idea that was ever inserted into the minds of humanity. An idea that promoted freedom and liberty unlike anything else this world has ever seen. And now Those nefarious historical revisionists want to redesign it. They want to teach that our founding fathers were barely literate barbarians who were sexist, who were racist, who were bigoted homophobes. That, again, is lending credence to this nonsensical doctrine of identity politics. And if we are not careful, identity politics will fuel the fire, and all of these little brush fires that have been started by the quaff waffler himself, leading to the destruction of the United States of America as a representative republic and as we know and love it. And that's exactly what the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media wants to see happen. They are jubilant right now. They see this as the culmination of all of their efforts to destroy not only the Republican Party, but to annihilate the conservative movement, to hopefully bury once and for all true, principled constitutionalists. They think that. They can think that. They can think that all they want. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further devoid of fact and reality than this nonsense that they're peddling. But they want to peddle it because this is, again, a raw, emotional deal that they have been working for. They have been so dedicated to causing people to emote that they have even shut off their own mental faculties. They have closed their own eyes to reality. They have worked in their own manner to become these useful idiots for corrupt politicians. And of course, we've heard that false narrative all throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle. Well, Trump's an outsider. He's no politician, I tell you what. Except he is. He has been funding the most nefarious, the most hated aspects of this rogue and illegitimate method of the federal government. He supports the federal land grabs that have occurred out in our westerlymost states. Remember, folks, that the federal government owns 90+% of the land in our westerlymost states. But Donald Trump doesn't want that to go back to the states and to the people. No, this land's too greatly to give back. We don't know what they might do. They might put a tower on it, and I wouldn't want that because then I'd have to put a tower on it. It's as he said when he was in an interview with the woman that he hates the most, and we do know that he hates women, Megyn Kelly. When he said that if I lost the bid for the White House, it would be a colossal waste of time and money. You sniveling son of a female dog. It's not just about your money. It's not just about your time. You're vying to be the representative of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic. You are supposed to be the spokesperson for the entire country. That is the job that you are applying for. You are applying for the job of that of a civil servant, a public servant. You serve the people. But that's not the way you look at it. You look at it the other way around. That's why you quaff waffle on all of these important issues. It's why you have no core values or morality, and it's why you are wholly unacceptable. It is why you have been the death of the Republican Party, at least for this go-around. But of course, we, the true principled constitutional conservatives, who have not been shy about stating that he was an unacceptable candidate to us and that we see no distance in the water between he himself and Hillary Rotten Clinton, and therefore could never vote for him. No, we will be blamed as their favorite scapegoats. The gutless opposition party and the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, they love blaming us for it all. They love pointing the finger at us and saying, see, this is why the Republicans can't win. You know, I had a dear friend say that she'd be happiest if a Republican president won. I wouldn't. I'd be happiest if a conservative president won. Because make no bones about it, as they have admitted themselves, it's the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party. But how much of a party is it without the base? Without the base that has supported it for the last 36 years. I'll tell you right here and right now that it would not be much of a party at all. That it would be a shell. That it would be an unelectable thing. Of course, they're going to pin their hopes, dreams, and aspirations for gaining the highest office in the land and thereby the reins of political power on the statements of Donald Trump, who has even come out and admitted, rather stupidly in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, that he doesn't need nor want the support of true principled constitutional conservatives, that it's not necessary, and now it's being parroted by the Branch Trumpidians. Well, enough is enough. You say it's not the Conservative Party? Well, it's certainly not the Populist Party either. So go to hell. We're tired of it. And again, this is the same type of divide and conquer that has been the linchpin of the identity politics groundswell of divisiveness that has been plaguing this country from coast to coast and border to border. And Donald Trump is not a solution to that. Donald Trump has no idea what unites us, because by his own admission, he has never once fully read the Constitution because he never saw any value in it. That is Donald Trump. That is what he believes. That is what he is orchestrating on the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Well, enough is enough. It's not going to work. We have been warning you for 10.5 months now that it's not going to work. And it's already unraveling as we said it would. Remember, we said that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media would, once he became the presumptive nominee of the gutless opposition party or GOP, turn their backs on him, pull out their arrows from their quivers, and prepare for the relentless assault that is going to continue from this day forward until November. And where will it leave us? Where will it put us? It'll put us right where we said it would put us. It would put us into a choice between a Fabian socialist from New York who wants to expand the scope and power of government versus a Fabian socialist from New York who wants to expand the power in government but has a little more money. Oh, gee. Or let's put it even another, more succinct way. It's going to be a corrupt politician from New York versus her corrupt donor, top donor from New York. Well, if he was her top donor, and even said in front of the media back in 2009 that Barack Hussein Obama was doing a wonderfully job as president, that Hillary Rotten Clinton was a fantastic Secretary of State, and that they were doing things that no one imagined possible? Well, that would seem to suggest that he supports that. Oh, but now he's had a change of heart. He's Reagan, even though Reagan had 18 years of solid support for conservative principles and ideology. No, this guy, who doesn't even have 18 milliseconds of it, oh, he's the real deal. He's the great negotiator. He says everything is negotiable. Everything is up for grabs. Bovine excrement. Let me repeat that. Bovine excrement. He's not the real deal. He's the quaff-waffler. He is the P.T. Barnum of our era. And he is going to cause identity politics to flourish. Why? Because he is the divisive quaff waffler. Look at the way he caved on the gender-neutral bathroom issue. Remember, he came out and attacked the North Carolina legislature for trying to defend the institutions and traditions that have been time-honored and a part of human civilization for millennia? Oh, no, no, no. We have to go and acquiesce to this group that's not even 0.1% of the population, the LBGTQSTFULMAOWTF group. No, we need to just let them into the bathrooms with our girls, or let women into the men's bathroom. We just need to let this be, because we don't want to be discriminatory. Oh, but I am the candidate who's fighting against political correctness. Give me an ever-loving break. You are nothing more than a worthless huckster, charlatan, and a liar. And we will not rest until we put an end to this senseless crap that you have been propagating and peddling for the vast majority of your life. And so now you want us to believe that you've suddenly had a change of heart, that you've suddenly become conservative? I don't buy it. Anybody with a modicum of sanity and intelligence doesn't buy it either. And for those who have made their commitment to the hashtag Never Trump movement, never means never. So for all of those who are calling for a tyranny of a false unity, or want to say that we're supporting Hillary Rotten Clinton, go to hell, because it's not true. We're not supporting Hillary. Silence is not assent, so a vote against Hillary would be a vote for Donald, using your logic. So if I go and vote third party, or if I write in Bob the Alien for president, then that's not a vote for Hillary, therefore that must be a vote for Donald. So quit telling us that we shouldn't vote third party, or quit telling us that we shouldn't vote for Donald, or that we should, that we have to, because that's a vote for Hillary. No, we're not voting for Hillary, we're voting against Hillary. But we also happen to be voting against Donald. But by your logic, by the argument that you're using based on this logic fallacy, a vote for the Libertarian would be a vote for Donnie. You should love that. And besides, a vote for Donnie, by his own admission, and using your same logic again, would be a vote for Bernie, because he wants to bring disenfranchised Bernie Sanders supporters into the Republican Party. That's who he claims he's going to be replacing true, principled, constitutional conservatives with. Oh, that's a brilliant strategy. Why, he's not a billionaire. Oh, wait, yes, he is. He's never used his business prowess to screw over workers. Oh, wait, yes, he has. He's never just been buying off politicians and influencing politics with his money. Oh, wait, yes, he has. Oh, crap. He personifies everything that the Sanderistas loathe and despise about the so-called rigged system. Yeah. That's gonna win him over. And then, with his positions against women, his chauvinistic language, and yes, I hate engaging in identity politics, but there is a limit to what is acceptable for the highest office in the land, to what is acceptable in society, to what would be allowed to be the spokesman and representative of the entire body politic of the United States of America. No, that will ensure that the Sanderistas will never support Donald Trump either. So by playing the role of chameleon, he is ensuring defeat. He is embracing a very stupid form of identity politics. But again, to really find solutions, we have to turn to the key that has been with us since the inception of this nation over 230 years ago, and that key is none other than our shared United States Constitution. It has been with us since the birth of this nation over 230 years ago. We have to embrace our role, duty, obligation, and responsibility as the popular sovereigns. And we must stand up to anyone and everyone, irrespective of whether they have an R or D after their name, who would move to tear this country apart at the seams, to abandon their principles, and to turn against the Constitution, thereby turning against our fundamental and inalienable rights. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol, and believe me, folks, you won't need to play identity politics with her, because she doesn't care. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I also invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you might have, either here on our YouTube page or on our Google Plus page, and yes, even on our Facebook page. And on top of this, I invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle of @RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find the departure board that includes our personal Twitter accounts, my personal Twitter account, and the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton. You will also find our Blogspot page, which has audio blogs that will keep you sure of your identity. And you will find the Cafe Press account, which has all sorts of goodies and trinkets and apparel and all sorts of things with our logos on it, like drinking glasses, hats, iPad, iPhone covers with our logo on it, Android phone covers with our logo on it, tote bags, you name it, it's there. Leave your mark of identity to your friends and let them know that you are filled with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment that we seek to provide here at Radio Aviation Excellence every time we fly you over the friendly airwaves. As always, folks, give us a little bit of support. Thank you. We do this for you. We couldn't do this without you. And we look forward to seeing you the next time we take off over the friendly airwaves. Do take care. We shall see you next time.